Ladies, gentlemen, and Haradrim of all ages, Vessel of Hatred released almost 2 months ago now, and as the first expansion for Diablo 4, it has sort of set a lot of expectations. It had a ton of build-up before it happened, and it came with a lot of ceremony too, bringing in things like a brand new class in the Spiritborn, a new addition to the main story campaign, and multiple new activities and specific ways to power your character up as well. Since launch, the concept being essentially sold by the developers is a live service Diablo game, 4 seasons per year, 3 months each on average, and then 1 expansion happening each year as well, as a sort of larger reset on a bigger scale. This was always the plan, and while there have been various things to sort of indicate this is still the case, there's also interesting things to note, like them originally stating that a season for Diablo 4 would never be shorter than 12 weeks. Then Season 5 was, well, only 2 months long, which is less than 12 weeks. So obviously things change. I'm not blaming them for that. I'm not saying it was a problem or that's a bad thing. I'm just pointing it out and saying that just because something was the plan at the beginning doesn't mean it will continue to be as such. That said, the yearly expansion is different, honestly, and the main reason is because that idea was possibly at least somewhat born of a desire to create an ever-evolving story in the Diablo world, sure, but there is a larger component of this, where expansions are sold for money. They generate income, and that's what the higher-ups are after at the company. That's what the people behind the actual business that is Blizzard liked when they heard the idea of yearly expansions. And so in my personal opinion, we will get yearly expansions. I don't really think that's a question. It will happen as long as they can justify the manpower for the actual rewards as far as the money they make. The question is more so, how long will this last, and how much quality can the expansions retain in between them as well with this schedule? One thing mentioned recently in an interview with Polygon done by Rod Ferguson is that Vessel of Hatred isn't really over yet either, at least in the sense that there will be bonus bits added with each season that will only affect people who bought the first expansion. The wording that he uses is pretty unclear, honestly. It could be taken to mean that they'll be adding story continuations in, but I think that's pretty unlikely in comparison to the much more sensible option that is new runes being added between seasons. Like in Season 7 we have some new runes being added, maybe new Undercity tributes, more items exclusive to the Spiritborn as another example, and all of those things are only available if you've bought the expansion, so it stays totally in line with what he has said here. It rides the exact line of potentially generating some hype without being technically incorrect, and I think that's exactly what we have here. That said, one of the biggest selling points by far of a new expansion for Diablo 4 was the addition of a new class in the Spiritborn. Yes, obviously there have been a ton of issues with balance based around just a bunch of unintended bugs and interactions, but over 70% of the people who have played Diablo 4 during Season 6 since the actual launch of the expansion have at least spent some level of time on gameplay on the Spiritborn class. That was a stat right from Blizzard. That is a massive amount of people. So whether it has become your new main class or not, a new class is just a very large draw in an expansion setting, just undeniably. That said, if the plan is yearly expansions, does that mean a yearly class edition as well? I mean, Diablo, Diablo 2, Diablo 3, these games all had a relatively small roster of class choices within them. Even Diablo Immortal only has 8 classes at most. And with that being the case, it begs the question, what is the upper limit for Diablo 4? The more classes and playstyles you add, the harder it becomes to actually balance the game between them all. Diablo 4 has 6 classes currently. If we expect 1 class per expansion, 1 expansion per year, that would put us at 7 classes in 2025, 8 in 2026, 9 in 2027, so on and so forth, which would just make the game less and less manageable over time in this regard. Is it doable? I mean, sure, yeah, of course it is possible. Is it going to turn out well? Honestly, only time can tell, but it makes the question interesting. It adds a sort of edge to it. That said, I doubt they plan to literally release an expansion per year until the end of time and the heat death of the universe, unless it sells extremely well every single year. And so that lays the sort of truth under it all in my mind. Yes, they will do yearly expansions, and yes, every expansion, at least for now, will likely have a new class because they want to front load the live service aspect as much as possible and convince people to buy expansions. If they put a year between class releases, they will lose a bunch of people and probably lose a fair bit of money too. A player lost is not as easy to bring back as someone that you have consistently checking the game out on a semi-frequent basis, and so they want to burn the candle bright, so to say, on this one. Melt that thing quick, and if it smells good enough, they will expand upon it further. But now the obvious focus for the moment is on the present and the very near future, taking it 1 year at a time. And so yes, my expectation is we will probably have an expansion within the next year, and it will probably have another class that isn't currently in Diablo 4. That said, this brings the further question of, will it be another fully brand new class like the Spiritborn, or could we possibly see a returning class from a previous Diablo game like the Crusader or the Paladin? Could we see the Witch Doctor or the Monk, or even one of the classes that's exclusive to Diablo Immortal, so on and so forth? And this, I don't really have anything specific to quote from the developers for, but in the the past, the reasoning they gave for having a new class in Vessel of Hatred was that it offers far more creative possibilities if they don't sort of cage themselves in with a pre-existing concept or idea. However, a lot of that discourse was them specifically saying that the new class in the first expansion would be a fully new one. Not that every added class forever would be, and in that sense, to me, I think it would sort of make sense to actually alternate between these ideas. If we have an expansion every year and an additional class for every expansion, then maybe we should go back and forth each year. Vessel of Hatred was a brand new class, so maybe the next expansion could be a returning classic class. The expansion after that, another brand new class, and then after that, once more returning, so on and so forth. Again, this just hinges on the idea of this going forward for at least a few years the way that it is right now, but I think that would create a nice sort of rhythm of new things being added into the game. And this would, in theory, give them the space to make sure every properly new class that they create is creative, it is special, it is unique, as it would take less creative output on the sort of in-between years with the returning classes that have existed in the past than it does to make a whole brand new thing. All in all, I think going into Season 7, Diablo 4 is again looking to be quite solid. Balance issues aside, of course, from Vessel of Hatred, it was a very strong release. Season 7 is so far looking like it's got a really good lineup of additions to the game too, seasonal or otherwise. Back at the initial game release, a lot of us who were playing at the time kept saying that the game felt like it could become a really good game with a little bit more time in the oven, if it had just been given a bit more time to work out some of the systems that felt a bit underdone. A lot of these things, though, have been tackled one at a time each season over the last year or so, and with Season 7 finally adding the long-requested armory feature so people can even play multiple builds without it getting confusing and just sort of inconvenient, a lot of people seem to agree that we are finally back on track. If Diablo 4 had launched initially with the game that Season 7 is looking to be, the discourse around the game would be astonishingly different than it is right now or has been. And so the future of Diablo 4 is becoming at least a little bit promising in my mind from this point forward, and I do look forward to at least knowing what the next expansion will be. The last thing I sort of wanted to talk about here, however, is the cycle that I'm starting to see happen that I definitely don't want to see continue. I want to see it break. Season 1, 2, and 3 had seasonal power-ups of their own kind. Season 4 and 5 had no seasonal power-ups, which led up to the expansion, which was Season 6, which technically also had no seasonal powers, but runewords were added with the expansion. What I see looking at that is a potential pattern, a cycle, where the focus is on new content right after a release, right after the expansion release, right after the base game release, and now hence Season 7 essentially having two separate seasonal power-ups, a new subzone takeover event, and new mini-dungeons, and then this backs up into the base game mechanic repair for a couple of seasons before the expansion actually releases. This has obviously only been the first sort of run around the yearly loop here, but I'm hoping this isn't an indication that only 50% of seasons in future will have actual seasonal power-ups attached to them, because in my mind that's a large part of what makes the seasons themselves interesting in comparison to just playing like on the Eternal Realm, as you might as well do that if there wasn't seasonal things to take advantage of. That just about does it for today, and everyone, a discussion about expansions in Diablo 4, what the future seemingly looks like for the game, if we should expect the same sort of release schedule in the future, and what might continue to be a part of it. I hope you've all enjoyed this then, and of course, as usual, feel free to leave your own thoughts down in the comments below. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.